Hello and welcome back to Little Gems Crochet Co. Today we're going to go over how to make this gorgeous granny square dress. I'm 5'8" and a size 8, but I will give variations throughout if you're a different size or height. All you will need is a size 4 crochet hook, some scissors, a tapestry needle for weaving in the ends, and I used about 9 balls of the light grey, white and light blue yarn, and then about 13 balls of the navy yarn, all of which I got from Wool Warehouse, and I will link in the description. We're going to start this dress by making a slip knot. Then if you're going to go for the same size as me, we need to chain 179, which does seem like a lot, but like I stated, this will be from where you want it to hit your leg, up over your shoulder and back down the other side. So continue going and I will meet you at the end of the 179 chains. Now that you have all your chains, we're going to turn our work and do a stack single crochet to start the next row. To do this, we insert our hook into that first chain, yarn over, pull through like you would a normal single crochet. And then we're going to insert our hook back into that front loop, yarn over again and pull through. And then finally yarn over and pull through. I would then take a stitch marker and mark where that is, because when you work back along the row, it would be very easy to work along it like it's a normal stitch rather than the end of the row. Now we're going to go back along the chains doing a granny stitch. So we're going to yarn over and insert our hook into the next chain along and do 2 double crochets. So that's the first double crochet and then the second double crochet. Then what we're going to do is skip 2 stitches in the chain and we're going to do 3 double crochets into the third stitch along. So insert our hook and do our 3 double crochets. 1, 2, and finally number 3. And then we're going to repeat those steps along the row. So we're going to skip 2 chains and then do 3 double crochets into the next chain. So continue this along and I will meet you at the end of the row. Once you reach the end of the row, we're going to do a single double crochet into that very last chain. Like so. So we just have 1 double crochet at the very end. We're not doing a cluster. Then we're going to turn our work and we're going to go back to doing our stacked single crochet to start the row. So we insert our hook, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through, then insert back into the loop on the left, then yarn over and pull through and yarn over and pull through both loops. Then to work along the row, what we're going to do in that first gap, and it's the space between the cluster of double crochets and the double crochet we just did at the end of the first row, we're going to do 2 double crochets. And there's our second double crochet. And then what we're going to do along the rest of the row is in each gap in between the clusters, we're going to do 3 more double crochets into each of the gaps. So continue with your double crochets and I will meet you at the end of the row. Like the previous row, in that final stitch, we're just going to do 1 single double crochet. Now, this is where I decided personally to start changing the colour on my pattern, which I will go through in a second. But one thing you need to consider if you're going to change colours or when you want to change colour is how wide you want the shoulders to be, because that will determine the width of the dress. Now, this needs to be decided on the shoulder section, not in the central section, because if you make the central section too wide, the dress will just fall off your shoulders. So the shoulders need to be the correct width. For reference, I'm a UK size 8 and I'm making my shoulder width 6.5 inches. The measurements don't have to be exact though. Once you've done a few rows, you can always hold the project up on your shoulder to see how far it falls off your shoulder when it sits where you want it to sit on your shoulder and go from there. So how I changed colour, I picked up the yarn of the new colour I wanted to use, in this instance white, pulled through a small loop and just pulled that tail a little bit shorter and then turned my work. Then we're going to do the same stacked single crochet as before. Just make sure you hold that tail really tightly in place, and once you've done this you can straight away weave in those ends. I just feel like this gave it a really clean start to the beginning of each row, but if you've got another way you prefer, go with that. Then continue on your row as you did the previous row, and I will meet you back when the shoulder panel is the width that you want. This is my completed shoulder panel. It's 16 rows or approximately 6.5 inches. So once you're happy with the width of your shoulder, the next thing you need to do is use a stitch marker and mark halfway along the length of your project. So like I've done there, folded it in half and put the stitch marker in place. Because the next section we're going to do is the front section, and we're going to have to do the front section and back section separately to leave room for the hole for your head to go through. So continue your granny stitch as you have previously, and I will meet you when you hit this marker. Once you reach where the marker is, remove it and do a single double crochet into that stitch, as what we're now going to do is reduce the stitch count per row to give a nice rounded neckline. So once you've done this, turn your work and we will carry on. So if you're following my pattern exactly, this is where I change colour. If you're not changing colour, or you're changing colour at a different rate, you don't have to change colour where I am here. But what we're going to do is start as usual with our stacked single crochet, whether you're changing colour with that or not. And remembering what I previously said about we're now going for some shaping, this is going to be the only stitch we do here, and we're going to continue on our double crochets in the next gap along. So here we're going to do our 3 double crochets as normal and continue our granny stitch down the end of the row. Finish our row as normal, turn our work our way back up, and once you're at the end of that row, I will meet you back here. To finish this row, all we need to do is a single double crochet into that gap, and then we're going to turn our work and carry on. Now again, you don't have to change colours here, I just happen to be changing colours on this row. But what we're going to do to start off this next row is insert our hook into the middle stitch of the cluster nearest the end of the row, like so. And we're going to do our stacked double crochet from here. This will just help really define the neckline. And once you've done your stacked single crochet, in the next gap along, we're just going to do 2 double crochets compared to our usual 3. And then we're going to continue down the row with our usual 3 double crochets. And then this is the last row that we are decreasing our number of stitches on. So we're going to continue on as normal, and I will meet you after you've done approximately 14 more rows, or about just under 6 inches worth of width. And once you've completed those rows, your project should start to look like this. So you've got the decline at the beginning and then the straight up. And now what we're going to do is increase the number of stitches per row again, as we're going to go back up around the neckline. So what we're going to do to start increasing the number of stitches per row is we're going to do 3 of our double crochets into the center of that cluster at the end of the row. So rather going into the gap, we're going into that middle stitch and doing our 3 double crochets. And then in that final stitch, we're just going to do 1 double crochet. And as you can see, that's already created a small incline. And now turn your work, and we're going to start this row as we've done previously with a stacked single crochet. Like I say, if you're changing colour the same way I am, this is a row that we're going to change our colour. If not, do your stacked single crochet as usual. Then in that first gap from the row below, we are going to do 2 double crochets. And then we're just going to carry along this row as normal with our 3 double crochets in every gap. Get to the end, do our usual turning our work and our stacked single crochet, and I will meet you at the end of the next row. Now to finish this row, we're going to do what we've done previously and do our 3 double crochets into that middle stitch of the cluster of the row below. So going into that middle stitch and doing our 3 double crochets. And then doing one more double crochet into that very end stitch of the row. Now you want to repeat the steps from the last 2 rows 2 more times, and then that completes our section where we are increasing our amount of stitches. So I will meet you back here once you have finished those 2 rows. And once you have finished those 2 rows, your project should look like this. So your project looks equal on the decline and the incline rows. And now what we're going to do is start the next section, which is the back section. So what we're going to do is count 5 clusters along from where we started our front section, and that is where I've placed my stitch marker. As the back section of our dress scoops a little lower than the front. And now we're going to do similar to what we did on the other side. And as we work down the row, we are going to decrease the amount of stitches per row on this section. So when we had the crochet marker, what we're going to do is start with our usual stacked single crochet. We're going to repeat the steps we did on the other side for our decreasing stitches, and this starts with our stacked double crochet. But once you've repeated the stitches from the front panel on the back panel, I will meet you at the end when you've completed your back panel. And please ensure you've got the same number of rows on your front panel as you do your back. Once you've completed your back panel, your project should now be looking like this. So you've got 3 sides completed and you've just got that gap at the top to do your other shoulder section. And first thing we're going to do is close off that gap at the top. Start by chaining 17 or the amount of stitches you've got in the closed off section of the dress so that they match up. Then, once you've done your 17 stitches, cut a long tail and pull it through. Then when you lay out your project flat, your chain will be the exact gap between the 2 ends there. But now we're going to do an invisible stitch to connect the chain to the other side of the project. Using a tapestry needle, we're going to insert the yarn through, not the end stitch of the end cluster, we're going to go through the next one along and pull that tight. And then we're going to insert our needle into that very last chain right in the center and pull it through. And as you can see, it makes a mock stitch. So from the top, you can't actually tell that that's not a real stitch. And just ensure that your chain is completely straight before weaving in your ends. Once you've completed this, we can go back to doing our normal granny stitch across the whole project because we have now bridged that gap. I will meet you back here once your granny stitch reaches this gap. So even though this will be different to what we've been doing for the rest of the row, it's exactly the same as when we went back on our original chain. So we're going to do 3 double crochets into that first chain. Then we're going to skip 2 chains and do 3 more double crochets into that third chain. And we're going to continue that across the rest of this chain and then go back to our normal granny stitch for the rest of the row. After that, we're going to continue our rows as normal, and I will meet you back once you've got the same number of rows as you do on the first shoulder section you completed, which in this case is 16 rows. Now that we've done the body, the next thing to do is the arms. This is just a repeat of the stuff we did to start the main body. So what we're going to do is chain, and in this instance, we're going to chain 72. Bearing in mind though, my sleeves are a tiny bit too long for me, but I prefer that them being a bit oversized than undersized. So bear that in mind when you're doing your chain. Once you've finished your chain, exactly the same as we've done before, we're going to do our stacked double crochet and our granny stitch along the row. Continue this until you have 32 rows and then repeat all the steps again, so that gives you both sleeves, and then I will meet you back here. Now you've completed both sleeves, it's time to attach them to the body. As you can see here, I've put a stitch marker where the center of my body piece is to make sure that my sleeve sits in the right place. And just for now, I'm going to put in some more stitch markers because I like to hold things up against my body and just make sure that it does sit right for me personally. Now I know I'm happy with the size, I'm going to attach the pieces together using a whip stitch. However, if you've got a different method of attaching them together you prefer, go for that. So making sure the body of our project and the sleeve is still lined up, we're going to take our tapestry needle and put it through the chain there, right where the corner is of the sleeve, and pull through. And leave a long tail because we need to weave this in at the end. Then we're going to go back around to the side we started on and insert through the next chain along, and again straight through to the other side on the sleeve and pull it through. And make sure each time you're doing this you are pulling it tightly now. We just want to leave it loose at the end so we can weave that tail in. And we're going to continue this down the entire sleeve, and make sure you do not miss any chains. You want to make sure that's nice and secure. Once you've attached the first sleeve, repeat the steps on the other sleeve, and I will meet you back here once both sleeves have been attached. And once you've attached both sleeves, what we're going to do is pick our project up and fold it in half like so. As you can see here, the sleeves are now folded over. So what we're going to do is we're going to sew along the edges so it joins the sides of our body pieces together and the bottom of our sleeve together. And we need to do this on both sides. And please don't sew the bottom up. Once you've done that, there are some optional final details which I think just tidies the whole thing up. So around the edge of the neckline, I did a single crochet into every stitch or stitch equivalent, just to give it a bit more structure and definition. You can also do this around the bottom edge of the dress or around the edges of the sleeves. It's completely up to you, whatever your personal preference is. And there you have it. Your granny stitch dress is now complete. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out my other social channels.